Hello there. In today's video I'm looking at another basket case. So we're looking at a New Zealand wine, and this is M.A.U. Wines Basket Case Pinot Noir 2021. It's described as being from the Southern Clays, which is a sub-region of Marlborough. So a New Zealand Pinot Noir. I should explain, M.A.U. wines, that's the initials of the winemaker, Marc Udy, so Marc Alexander Udy, M.A.U. Now, after 15 years of working for several major producers in New Zealand and Australia, and even having worked the 2011 vintage in Vosne Romanee in Burgundy, Marc Udy felt it was time to branch out. He, with his partner Camilla, set up their own enterprise. At the time they were looking for a base, they found a small winery and a small vineyard in Clevedon, which is just south of Auckland. And so Marc set up his enterprise there, and now makes a couple of wines from Clevedon. There's a Bordeaux blend and a rosé, and utilises some contacts he had from his time working with Villa Maria to buy fruit in Marlborough to make the wines that he makes there from the Southern Clays sub-region. Now the Southern Clays is a sub-region, not surprisingly, to the south of the Marlborough region, where the climate is slightly cooler. It's slightly more sheltered from the winds that blow along the Wairau Valley. It's drier, the soil is a sort of a combination of mineral-rich grey wacky rock with low fertility, low clay. And as a result, although being perhaps slightly cooler, the Southern Valleys tends to make quite rich styles of wine. And Pinot Noir has become something of a focus for the Southern Valleys, as the wines from here can have texture, structure, and still retain some minerality. Now this wine, as with the Chardonnay that we've also tried from this producer, comes from the Cowley family's vineyards, and these were planted about 30 years ago. And the Cowley family took over an estate, Arntsfield, which actually claims to have been the first estate to produce wines in Marlborough, but by the time that the Cowley family came to buy it, there were no vines there, so they completely recreated the estate essentially. Now these vineyards are in what are called the Ben Morven foothills of Marlborough, and this is sort of right in the back of the Wither Hills, hidden away there. And the Cowleys have got 65 hectares of vines there. I mean, they do have Chardonnay, obviously, we know that, and they have Sauvignon Blanc, but predominantly what they've got planted there is Pinot Noir. Now, notes I've seen suggest that the Pinot Noir they have planted there is a mix of Dijon clones, two in particular, 667 and 777, so more modern clones tending to give quite a ripe style. But I also believe they've got some of the Abel clone there, which is New Zealand's own clone, which claims its origins to have come from the vineyards of Romanee Conti in Vosne Romanee. But yes, the Cowleys believe that the clay soils here are particularly suited to Pinot Noir. And their vineyards are a sort of a magnificent sweeping site. They divide them into quite large blocks, and vineyard practices here are entirely organic, although I note this wine isn't actually certified as being organic. So when I tried this wine with the winemaker, one of the things that really struck me is there's a sort of a real richness and complexity to it, and I wondered if that was because of an extensive use of whole bunches, but I'm told there's actually only 10% whole bunch in here. What that means is that a proportion of the bunches are going in there without being destemmed, without the berries being broken, and that will help to lengthen the fermentation, because as the ferment goes on, those berries will slowly break open because of the heat of the ferment going on. They will release sugary juice later into the fermentation, continuing to feed that, and that can help elongate the fermentation. Also, the stalks can add some tannins if they're ripe enough, and they can help by bringing oxygen into the ferment. It tends to affix itself to the pedicels. The downside is that sometimes that can take a bit of colour away, but with only 10%, that's probably not a worry. Also, I believe a portion, possibly a similar amount, of the fruit was left as whole berries, again lengthening the fermentation but not doing any of the removing the colour. Maybe the pedicels weren't ripe and therefore they weren't suited to this being whole bunch. The wine has a lovely dark colour and it's quite extracted, so I'm assuming there's a fairly long maceration, and always certainly plenty of punching down of the cap of skins back into the fermenting liquid. Clearly the wine is aged in oak. I don't have anything in the notes that tell me the type, the age. I would assume French oak, and I'd assume a portion of it is new because there's quite a noticeable oak the aromas are quite noticeable even as I'm standing here. And the other thing I'd note from the label is that the wine's been fined with organic egg whites. So just to sort of maybe take a little bit of extra tannin out of the wine, it's been gently fined with that. So the egg whites are organic, but vegans might not want to drink this wine. So I'll just draw that to your attention. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Swirling it in, I've got a nice big glass here just to release the aromas properly. That is a beautifully deep, dark ruby red. I mean, it's not opaque, but there's a real sort of depth of pigmentation. There's a lovely vibrancy to the colour, actually. The wine's got 14% alcohol, but as I swirl it, it is clinging to the glass. It doesn't seem to be doing so particularly readily. So let's see what we think of the aroma, shall we? Wow, the aromas are powerful. I mean, as I say, I was standing here talking to you. They were jumping out of the glass at me. There are some sort of really big, rich, sort of dark cherry, dark plum, almost to sort of licorice sort of notes of intensity. And that is supported by very well integrated cedary notes, maybe slightly toasty oak note. And then there's a tiny little sort of greenish note, which I think was what was pointing me towards thinking that there might be a higher proportion of whole bunch fermentation going on than there actually was. There's a plentiful note of slightly almost charred oak, very powerfully at the beginning there. The rich fruit is behind it, but just at the moment the oak is really quite forward and quite dominant. But it's really emphasising the sort of the black plum notes. There's almost a sort of a tiny dusting of pepper there, such as the intensity. But it's not quite got the depth of sort of dark licorice or something like that. So yes, more the dark plum than dark cherry, because the dark cherry would sort of seem to be juicier and softer. This is something to do with the fine, grainy tannins that are apparent from the beginning. They're very fine. There's a delicate dusting of them coming through there, giving good grip. There's a bitterness, and with the decent acidity, that's causing me to salivate. The wine's got a reasonable weight and roundness. The alcohol's adding that sort of warmth and body to the mid-palate. There are some notes of sweet spices just coming through at the top of that sort of rich black plum note and the ripe fruit there. The alcohol's perhaps closing off the finish a little, and I'm seeing slightly more the sort of cedary, pencil shaving type notes of the oak towards the end there. So I think that this is a wine with plenty of power in its fruit. Certainly the aromas are very forward and wonderful. I mean, you could quite happily mistake them for a Grand Cru from somewhere in the Côte de Nuit, for instance. There's a wonderful rich texture, but just at the moment the tannins are closing the fruit up a little bit. So I'd want to come back to this in 3 or 4 years' time and see if the fruit's opened out. It certainly seems to have the potential to come past the structure here. And yes, there are delicate notes of that sort of rich, dark fruit that are lingering very nicely, but they're not really fully open and expressing themselves completely. So what I'm hoping is that those will show themselves to a greater extent. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you're interested in trying to find this wine, I suspect it could be very difficult to get hold of. I believe it's their first vintage, and distribution is still quite limited. I will put a link in the box below to tell you where you can find it and what the pricing is. If you want to watch any more of these tastings, do please sign up and follow us. That way you can set yourself an alert and get a notification every time we publish a new video. If you have friends that you think might be interested in watching this, do please feel free to forward them the video. If you have any comments, please leave those in the box below. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. But most importantly, I do hope you'll find some time and manage to come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.